Ever since modern economic growth began 300 years ago, people have suffered from periodic bursts of anxiety that the technologies of the time would take on the work that they do, and basically, by and large, they've turned out to be wrong. And so, the argument of quite a lot of my work is that this time is different. Our technologies are just gradually but relentlessly becoming more capable. They are taking on more and more tasks and activities that until recently we were just sure human beings alone could ever do.
Wordt mijn werk straks vervangen door technologie? Die vraag is eeuwenoud, maar relevanter dan ooit. AI en robots worden iedere dag sneller, goedkoper en ze melden zich nooit ziek.
Hi Maroka. Hi Anna.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Hoe groot de invloed van technologie is, bleek maar weer toen de CEO's van alle grote techbedrijven op de eerste rij stonden tijdens de inauguratie van president Donald Trump.
Seeing those technology oligarchs standing there at the inauguration was a sign that these companies are not only economically powerful, but they're also just unimaginably politically powerful.
Daniel Susskind volgt deze stormachtige ontwikkelingen op de voet. Als econoom onderzoekt hij de invloed van AI op de toekomst van ons werk. Want hoe ziet een wereld eruit waarin steeds meer mensenwerk dreigt te verdwijnen en de ontwikkelingen van AI sneller gaan dan we ooit dachten?
So this is the SRL lab, where we have all the technology here, all our robots.
Brilliant.
So we have design artificial skin. This means that we can provide sense of touch.
The idea that you can build machines that touch and feel, those are things, well, I know economists until very recently thought, were sort of comfortably out of reach, and yet your work suggests that actually that might not be the case.
You see, it doesn't. It tried to continue to do what it's doing.
AI heeft de toekomst. Ook op terreinen waarvan we ooit dachten dat ze uitsluitend voor mensen bestemd waren. Dit biedt natuurlijk enorme kansen, zoals bij het rekenwerk van Daniels dochter.
Here we go. Right, shall we do one of the games? Welcome to Magical Times Table Adventure. Collect unicorns by solving multiplication problems. What's your name, brave mathematician? There we go. Rosa came up with a description for a game that she wanted to play to test her times tables, and we gave it to ChatGPT, and then I ran the Python code and it generated the game in a few minutes for Rosa to play, didn't it? So, question 3 times 8.
24.
Brilliant. Do you want to type it in and see what it does?
10.
Ah! You've got 4 magical unicorns. And it's kind of perfectly tailored to her interest at that particular moment. So it just sort of grabs her and pulls her in. Well, one of the few robust findings that we have from education research is the effectiveness of one-to-one tuition, for instance. We know that an average student who receives one-to-one tuition will tend to outperform 98% of students in a traditional classroom setting. So it's incredibly effective. But of course, it's also unaffordable. And that's what's so exciting about sort of personalized learning systems. Systems which try and tailor what is taught, how it's taught, the way in which it's taught, to the particular strengths and weaknesses of the student. Trying to replicate the interaction you might have with a human tutor, but doing so, and this is crucial, at a far lower cost. Try that. Yeah. 6 times 5, okay, that's tricky. I think that our technologies are just going to become more and more capable. And so our challenge as a society is to think about how we can flourish in a world where technologies around us are far more capable than they are today. And there I think we face 3 problems. One is the economic problem. How do we share our income in society if our traditional way of doing so, paying people for the work that people do, is just less effective than it was in the past? So it's a distributional challenge. It's a challenge of how we share our income in society. That's one. There's then the challenge which we've been talking about of political power, what we do about the growing political power of the large technology companies who are responsible for developing these technologies in the first place. The third is about meaning and purpose, how we provide people with a sense of meaning and purpose when perhaps their traditional source of it, the work that they do, is less widely available than it was in the past. A really good example In most big cities like London and New York, the most popular forms of transport had relied upon horses. Hundreds and thousands of them to heave cabs, carts, wagons, weighing a whole variety of vehicles through the streets. And with that, those horses came manure, huge amounts of it. And the policymakers at the time didn't know what to do. They couldn't simply ban horses from the street. They were far too economically important. But it turned out that they didn't need to worry, because what happened subsequently was that we had the invention of the automobile and the great manure crisis was over. And so this parable of horseshit, it's told as a sort of tale of technological triumph, a story of optimism. But for Wassily Leontief, the Russian-American economist, it suggested a far more unsettling conclusion. What he saw instead was how an animal that had played a central role in economic life had been banished by technology to the sidelines. And what he worried about was that what the combustion engine and cars were to horses, robots and computers would be to us, human beings. They would drive us out of work as well.
Zijn wij de paarden van de toekomst? Is het aandeel van mensenwerk straks nog minimaal in onze economie? En stel, er is straks minder werk, dan zijn er zoveel nieuwe vragen. Want hoe gaan we onze welvaart verdelen? Gaat iedereen profijt hebben van de veranderingen? Of worden een paar mensen heel veel rijker en de rest niet? En zijn er nog beroepen die de invloed van AI niet zullen voelen?
Until very recently, many people would have said, in response to the question, what can we do that machines could never do? People would have said, well, look, human beings can be creative. They can come up with new things. They can be incredibly original. They can be novel. They can take us by surprise. What are these generative systems particularly good at doing? Things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. They're particularly good at coming up with novel, original, surprising things.
Het is alweer zo'n 10 jaar geleden dat de wereldkampioen Go het opnam tegen een zelflerend algoritme.
Looks like Lee is taking a little bit of a break.
De wedstrijd ging de geschiedenisboeken in als AlphaGo versus wereldkampioen Lee Sedol. Met een zet die niemand zag aankomen, herschreef een AI-programma de spelregels.
Lee Sedol go to smoke, and AlphaGo just to play. It don't think about the opponent will be there or not. So Ajab see AlphaGo plays a move
37 in the second game.
and Ajab puts the stone in the board.
와, 정말.
When I see this move, for me it's just a big shock. What? Normally human will never play this one because it's bad.
That's a very surprising move.
I thought it was a mistake.
Normally human will never play this one.
So this is one of the most important moments in kind of the history of AI. What happens in that move? So just the context for it is that until very recently, most people in computer science thought we were about a decade away from ever building a system that could beat the world champion of Go. And yet, a few years ago, that is exactly what AlphaGo did. It sat down with this man, Lee Sedol, who at the time was the world Go champion, and it beat him 4 games to 1. And it was an amazing moment, but what was, I think, particularly important about it was that move, the 37th move in the second game.
I want to see Lee Sedol when he sees this move.
Lee Sedol was net zo verrast als de commentatoren. Deze 37e zet, gespeeld door AlphaGo, was iets wat geen mens ooit zou bedenken. Sterker nog, volgens het algoritme was de kans dat een mens deze zet zou doen slechts 1 op 10.000. Hiermee doorbrak AlphaGo de grenzen van de menselijke strategie waarop het oorspronkelijk was getraind. Het vond een zet die niet voortkwam uit menselijke redenering, maar uit iets nieuws. Een creatieve vonk van kunstmatige intelligentie.
For a long time in artificial intelligence, the view was if you wanted to build a system to outperform a human being, you had to somehow copy or imitate or replicate the way a human being performed a particular task or activity. So if you wanted to get a system to make a medical diagnosis, you had to sit down with the doctor, get them to explain how they make a medical diagnosis, and then try and capture that in a set of instructions or rules for one of these systems to follow. AlphaGo didn't have to copy the way Lee Sedol was playing the game. And the kind of practical consequence of that is, again, it means a sort of whole area of activity that we thought was out of reach of automation because we find it difficult to explain how we do it. Things that require, subtle, complex, tricky rules of thumb, intuitions, judgments, acts of creativity. Those turned out not to be a bottleneck on automation. One of the reasons I think white-collar workers, lawyers and doctors and teachers and accountants and architects and consultants need to be taking the challenge of automation very seriously. Not only because the latest technologies are particularly good at doing some of the things that they do. If you think about these generative systems, they're particularly good at drafting legal arguments or designing beautiful buildings or composing a compelling marketing campaign or whatever it might be. The sort of preserve of white-collar work, but also because white-collar work is, it's expensive stuff. And if you can find a way of doing it more efficiently without a human being, there are significant cost savings involved.
Een van de sectoren waar AI nu al merkbare invloed heeft op de arbeidsmarkt is de taxi-industrie.
Hi there. Hi Daniel. Hi. How are you? Nice to meet you. Daniel. Yeah, James.
Sommigen zien de invloed van apps op taxichauffeurs zelfs als de kanarie in de kolenmijn. Wat hier gebeurt kan straks veel meer beroepen treffen. En dus gaat Daniel mee met vakbondsman James Farrar om met eigen ogen te zien hoe de veranderingen in de praktijk uitpakken.
So we're moving across London to the east side of London. We're approaching Old Street roundabout. Oh look, how interesting. This is Pedal Me. Slavery-free logistics. So that means there are logistics that contain slavery in London. I agree with them, it's true. I'm actually very optimistic about technology. One of the first accusations, when you challenge it, is that you're a Luddite and you want to get in the way of progress. Far from it. I think these technologies are very promising, but the political economy around it is the problem in the decisions we make. There is this mental bias we have about tech determinism, that the technology is determining the business model, and I don't accept that. I think it's the business model is determining how this technology is being used, and it's the business model we need to tackle. So we're in the beginning of Brick Lane here now. I can already see some of the food delivery workers there. You can see the green and orange backpacks. It's the Uber Eats. Hi guys, how you doing? How's work? Good. Who are you on? Uber, Deliveroo, or Uber? Is it busy though? Slow. Yeah. How you doing? You waiting for work? Yeah. From the union. So what are you doing on your phone? Are you waiting for a job?
Yeah, I am waiting for a new order.
Do you take every order you're given?
Yeah.
Every job?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you not look at it and say, nah, I can't? No, you take every job?
Yeah. 278 pound.
278 for what?
Yeah, this one for 2 miles.
For 2 miles, 278 for 2 miles. You should be minimum £5, I think. How many hours do you work?
10? 10 hours.
10.
60, 70 pounds.
60, 70 pounds for 10 hours every day?
Yeah.
That's hard. Definitely need to join the union because they're taking all the money, right?
Okay.
Good luck.
Okay.
Keep fighting, eh?
Thank you.
Take care. Join the union.
Yeah.
Yeah? Let's join the union. The whole idea of the gig economy, where's the gig? Who's this gigging worker? Where's the soccer mom that's doing Uber in the afternoon? Where's the poet and the musician? They don't exist. That's the lie. The lie is we can casualize and ease access to work, but in return you give up your rights, right? What do you need rights for when you've got casual ease of access to work? That's the inherent trade-off, and that's the game. You know, that's the lie in the gig economy.
You know, even today, these technologies are also sort of undermining the kind of quality of the work that they do as well. Not simply the sort of the amount they get paid, but also, you know, the security of the work, the stability of the work, the kind of and here I'm thinking of the sort of less the sort of technologies that, you know, drive the cars, and more the, you know, platforms that support kind of gig workers working in the taxi sector, supporting them to work in far more, you know, insecure, unstable, you know, less quality work than, you know, a taxi driver might have been engaged in, say, 15, 20 years ago.
Years ago, these would have been automatic car washes with automatic systems and brushes and so on. But you can see it's all now been replaced by manual labour because the labour for this service is already so cheap that it doesn't justify investment in capital of new equipment.
You know, say 20 years ago, almost every petrol station in the country had an automated car wash. 25 years ago, say, where you kind of drove in and sort of big rollers came down and your car got sprayed and they turned, and it was a sort of automated car wash. Those don't really exist today. There's some, but they don't exist. Now, why don't they exist? Well, in large part, what happened was there was a huge movement of people who were willing to work in car washes at far lower wages than before, and essentially were able to sort of undercut these technologies. We're able to wash cars more efficiently than these more productive car washing machines.
This is where we could end up with professional driving, is that you know, drivers will be forced to compete for their labour against the cost of automation. And I think maybe the only thing worse than losing your job to automation may be not losing your job to automation, because you could be forced to accept lower and lower and lower wages with the threat of automation if you don't. How are you doing? Could I just get the basic, can we get a receipt? Thank you. Reminds me of what I've heard a public policy person from one of the major platforms say in Brussels. He said that there, in the future, be two types of workers. It'd be those who are master technology and those who will be mastered by it.
And that's what we see here.
I think you're seeing the end result of it. Either you're going to be mastered by it, or you're going to be commoditized by it. I think the people who are working here have been commoditized by it. They can't reach the bottom, even the bottom rung of technology. They're cheaper than the cheapest technology. They have to be to survive.
The AV revolution has arrived. After so many years, with Waymo's success and Tesla's success, it is very, very clear autonomous vehicles has finally arrived.
In 2026 zullen waarschijnlijk de eerste zelfrijdende taxis door de straten van Londen rijden. De kosten per rit, die nu al laag zijn, zullen nog verder omlaag gaan. De vraag is of de taxichauffeurs van nu ander werk gaan zoeken, of de concurrentie met de door AI aangestuurde zelfrijdende taxis aangaan. En hoe gaan we deze zelfrijdende robots eigenlijk economisch behandelen? Gaan ze, net als de oude chauffeurs, belasting betalen op het werk dat ze leveren?
If you're imagining a world where at one point you have an army of taxi drivers paying taxes, and then you move into a world where instead there's no taxi drivers at the wheel and you just have driverless cars, the question is, okay, well then how do we efficiently tax, you know, the large companies who are responsible for developing these driverless cars? Well, the 20th century was called the human capital century because it was believed that the prosperity of a country came from the skills and the capabilities of the workforce, the human capital. And so we developed, you know, a taxation regime around that human capital being the most, valuable and important type of capital in society. And so, in the UK, we have income tax, and, it's all structured around work. Perhaps in the 21st century, we might see a shift from human capital being the most important type of capital to other types of capital. Increasingly, these new systems and machines, things like artificial intelligence. And so the challenge for policymakers is to say, okay, well, how do we tax those increasingly productive technologies instead? I think the response is we need to find ways of more efficiently taxing the large companies who are responsible for developing many of these very disruptive technologies.
De techbedrijven moeten meer belasting gaan betalen en werknemersrechten beschermen. Toch is dit niet de politieke wind die nu uit Amerika waait. Vicepresident JD Vance drong er in Parijs bij de andere wereldleiders sterk op aan om de regulering ten aanzien van AI en de grote techbedrijven juist te verminderen.
Now, with the President's recent executive order on AI, we're developing an AI action plan that avoids an overly precautionary regulatory regime. Now, we invite your countries to work with us and to follow that model if it makes sense for your nations. However, the Trump administration is troubled by reports that some foreign governments are considering tightening the screws on U.S. tech companies with international footprints. Now, America cannot and will not accept that.
My worry is seeing the tech giants at the inauguration of Trump, but also the speech that JD Vance gave, is what if we fail? What if we fail to tax capital more? What if we fail to protect the workers' rights more? What happens?
We can't fail. It's not an option. If we find ourselves in a world where, as these large technology companies anticipate, we have systems that can outperform human beings at every economically useful task that they do, the problem's going to be a lot more acute in that world than it is in our current world. And I think that the sort of seriousness and acuteness of the problem will demand a solution, not only to provide a living to that displaced worker, but you cannot have a state unless you have a tax system that can support it. And so the tax system needs to change, and I think it will. I just sort of have this deep faith in our capacity to creatively and inventively and innovatively respond to the challenges that we face.